No beating around the bush. On September 12, 2025, Kiev launched a full-scale counterattack in Pokrovsk. This was not just a small counterattack or a test of force. It was a decisive effort to retake the strategic bridgehead that Russia was pressing. The Ukrainian Armed Forces, AFU, are trying to use everything they have: air power, artillery, armor, UAVs, and even information to turn the tide before winter sets in. The Pokrovsk front was already hot, and now it's even hotter because Kiev is concentrating its forces. Today's video on the History and War channel will show why Kiev launched its counterattack, the detailed developments, clearly illustrated defense maps, and the overall results and implications, so you can create videos that are both engaging and insightful. 1. Causes of the widespread counterattack. 1.1. Battlefield pressure and being squeezed. According to Dan Tree, in the north of Pokrovsk, the fighting was very fierce in the breakthrough zone of the Russian forces. The RFAF attacked strongly, while Kiev had to counterattack with all its might to regain control of the strategic bridgehead. Before that, Russia controlled small villages on the way to the R-85 highway and the city of Guliopoli in Zaporizhzhia, bringing pressure from auxiliary fronts to Pokrovsk. In addition, there were airstrikes on Belgorod, Russian territory, carried out by Kiev in retaliation for military defeats near Pokrovsk and to put psychological pressure on Moscow. 1.2. Kiev's tactical and strategic factors. A full-scale counterattack is a way for Ukraine to break or reduce the pressure from Russia's continuous attacks. When pressed, Kiev needs to take the initiative to minimize losses and maintain important supply lines. Kiev needs to regain strategic bridgeheads to prevent Russia from expanding its control north of Pokrovsk, which would pose a serious threat to the wider Donetsk defense line. Counterattacks are also a way to maintain the morale of the army and the population. Allowing Russia to advance without a fight could erode morale. 1.3. External support. Intelligence, weapons, supplies. The scale of the fighting has been enormous. Statistics from the Ukrainian General Staff indicate that in the past 24 hours, at press time, there have been 141 clashes, including 32 in the direction of Pokrovsk. There have been at least 56 Russian airstrikes, 90 guided bombs, 1,729 Russian suicide drones, and 3,257 artillery strikes. Ukraine also uses Air Force, airstrikes, UAVs to put pressure on Belgorod, forcing Russia to divide its troops or pull forces to protect the border area to reduce pressure on Pokrovsk. 2. Actual developments. North of Pokrovsk, fierce fighting continues in the breakthrough zone of the Russian forces. Kiev counterattacks strongly to regain the strategic bridgehead. In Zaporizhzhia alone, Russia has captured 2 more small villages on the way to the R-85 highway and the city of Guliopoli in Zaporizhzhia. Moscow continues to resist fiercely in Dobropoli, the northern Pokrovsk region, despite Kiev's fierce counterattack. Kiev wants to cut off the deep thrust. Kiev also increases airstrikes on Belgorod in retaliation, and to force Russia to deploy troops to protect the border area, helping to reduce pressure on other fronts. 2.3. Specific examples to make the video memorable. A light comedy example: the image of a Ukrainian UAV like an electronic eye flying from Belgorod, looking down, reporting, "Hey Russia, the small villages in the north are exposed," and then Kiev launches a counterattack to illustrate that it has not only infantry or armored power, but also reconnaissance and UAV information. 3. Interim results and impact. 3.1. Interim results. Kiev has succeeded at least in putting great pressure on Russian forces in Dobropoli and north of Pokrovsk, forcing Russia to put up fierce resistance. Kiev's airstrikes on Belgorod forced Russia to deploy troops to protect the border area, partially relieving the pressure on the Pokrovsk front. However, Russia maintains control of Dobropoli and some peripheral areas. Kiev's counterattack has not yet recaptured all the areas captured by Russia. Russia continues to put up strong resistance. 3.2. Tactical and strategic impact. Information psychological tactics. Kiev tries to use counterattacks plus airstrikes to demonstrate its initiative, to show its allies that Kiev is not demoralized and can strike back, which is very important in a war where international aid often depends on the image of victory or at least a clear effort. Pokrovsk front strategy. Pokrovsk remains a hotspot because if Russia crosses it, it will put Ukraine's supply lines in a difficult position, possibly opening up a further advance into the western regions of Donetsk. Kiev must hold Pokrovsk, otherwise the loss will be huge, not only in terms of territory but also in terms of morale and supply lines. War of attrition. Both sides suffer losses. Kiev must concentrate its forces, Russia must continue to defend, deploy large forces, and incur high costs. A full-scale counterattack requires manpower, ammunition, equipment, and if unsuccessful, will result in huge losses. Winter/terrain factors. Autumn is coming. Winter, cold weather, snow if it comes will make it more difficult to move tanks, armored vehicles, maintain tracked vehicles, and affect ground firepower. Kiev will benefit if it successfully counterattacks before winter gets too deep, increasing costs. 4. Comprehensive significance. 4.1. Military aspect. Kiev's full-scale counterattack in Pokrovsk shows that Ukraine still retains the ability to react quickly and coordinate tactics between the Air Force, artillery, UAVs, and ground forces. The use of airstrikes on Belgorod as part of the strategy to disperse Russian forces is a sign that Ukraine is not only counterattacking on the main front, but is using multi-dimensional warfare, both battlefield, information warfare, and impact on the enemy's rear. The success or failure of Pokrovsk in this counterattack will greatly affect the ability to hold the Donetsk defense line. If Pokrovsk is shifted, Kiev will have to adjust its defense line more widely. 4.2. International and political strategy. Kiev needs to maintain a strong image to continue receiving international aid, military, financial, information. Such a counterattack is a message to allies that Ukraine is still proactive, not just enduring. Allies can adjust their aid packages, sending more missile, artillery, anti-aircraft fire support if Kiev shows that the counterattack is feasible. 4.3. Humanitarian aspects. Civilians in Pokrovsk continue to suffer. Counterattacks often lead to shelling, bombing, and no distinction between civilians and soldiers, which can easily lead to civilian casualties, loss of homes, damage to roads, disruption of medical services and supply lines. Using airstrikes on Belgorod or the Russian-populated border areas also risks triggering a humanitarian crisis or civil unrest in Russia, affecting civilians, like schools closed, people forced to take shelter. 5. Difficulties and risks facing Kiev. A full-scale counterattack means Kiev will have to use a lot of forces, equipment, and ammunition reserves. If it continues for a long time, there is a risk of huge losses. Russia has a defensive advantage in Dobropoli. The terrain may have fortifications, bunkers, and protected supply lines. Kiev will have to overcome fortified positions, suffering high casualties. When Kiev counterattacks, its supply lines may be attacked. If Russia cuts off supplies, the counterattack may be blocked. Winter/terrain factors. Autumn is coming. Winter, cold weather, snow if it comes will make it more difficult to move tanks, armored vehicles, maintain tracked vehicles, and affect ground firepower. Kiev will benefit if it successfully counterattacks before winter gets too deep, increasing costs.
Winter, bad weather. If Kiev does not accelerate, the counterattack may be affected by weather, vehicle maintenance, and transportation difficulties. Civilian losses. If the counterattack pushes the fighting into residential areas, Kiev will have to try to limit civilian casualties because otherwise, domestic and foreign media will reflect negatively. 6.2. Territorial control layer. Before the counterattack, Russian-controlled Dobropoli area, northern outskirts of Pokrovsk, Ukrainian-controlled Pokrovsk center plus south, disputed areas near Dobropoli, northern outskirts of Pokrovsk. After the counterattack, the crossed-out areas are the areas that Kiev counterattacks want to regain, showing counterattacks from the south of Pokrovsk or from the center of Pokrovsk. The area adjacent to Dobropoli is the focus. 7. Summary of main content. Kiev decided to launch a full-scale counterattack in Pokrovsk on September 12, mainly targeting Dobropoli north of Pokrovsk in order to regain the strategic bridgehead that Russia was pressing. Reasons: great pressure from the battlefield, strategic interest in Pokrovsk, the risk of losing the supply line, the morale of the army and the people. Kiev wanted to maintain the initiative and not just defend. Developments. Fierce fighting north of Pokrovsk. Kiev increased airstrikes on Belgorod to put pressure on the other side of the border. Counterattack combined artillery, air force, UAVs, and ground forces. Temporary results. Kiev has not yet regained all the areas occupied by Russia, but has put strong pressure and forced Russia to resist fiercely. Russian supply lines are threatened. Dobropoli is still a key point. Kiev shows signs of regaining some small positions, but the results have not achieved a major breakthrough. What it means? This is a potential turning point if Kiev succeeds. Holding Pokrovsk will maintain the Donetsk defense line, keep supplies, keep morale. If it fails, Kiev may have to retreat tactically. Counterattacks will be costly, civilians will be affected, international allies will be watching closely to decide on further aid. The coming winter may make things harder. 8. The end. A call to action. If you read this far and are still intact, not shocked by the statistics and the tense maps, please hit like to remember that each like is an encouragement for historical truth, for the fighting force, and for us not forgetting those on the front lines. Share this video if you believe that knowledge and understanding of strategy, of terrain, of forces are not just daily news, but pieces of the puzzle for us to understand the depth of the conflict so that we don't get carried away by the emotions of the news noise. And don't forget to subscribe to History and War, where each video not only recounts today's battles, but also analyzes how today's battles affect tomorrow. Each map we build is a path for you to see more clearly the real battlefield, not just roads and fortresses, but the fate of supply lines, the endurance of people, and the will to not retreat.